All right, we're so excited to hop into this one. This is going to be a quickie today. And as Jen and I were thinking about things that were hitting our screens in the new year, we're hoping to boil it down to 5 ways to filter all of this media and what may feel like noise as we're in a moment of change. We might be hearing opposing points of view on health issues and mindset issues. We might be hearing science flip-flopping. And as we were chewing through it ourselves, we really kind of found value in thinking about these core issues, and we'll flag some of them as we talk today, and thinking about the 5 ways to help filter through it so you can get the practical so what it's worth doing with your time.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to It's Time. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Yes, and we are, we try not to kind of say exactly what time of year it is so that you can listen to this whenever you want to, but we are kicking off the new year. And as part of that, we are both just watching how much news we're getting and how loud it is on a couple of different topics and how sometimes opposite it is on a couple of topics around women's health, which is a great thing to have a lot of news. It's a great thing to have a lot of energy there. But sometimes it can feel overwhelming and confusing and be more of a impetus to tap out than to stay engaged. And so on our mission to make sure things are easy and accessible in the world of feeling better right now and for the long haul, we thought we'd take a very quick episode today to just set some filter parameters and maybe some second and tertiary resources for when these barrages of new bursts of media around health topics arrive. What's an easy go-to way to filter it and to de-escalate, de-stress as the news comes in?
Absolutely. And I think, whenever there's a big shift culturally, we get exposed to sides of discussions that maybe we hadn't been exposed to, which I think can actually be really helpful. But I also think, we live in a state of these amazing algorithms filtering information to us at all times, like whether it's your news feed or it's true social media, et cetera. And so sometimes it's hard to get a balanced picture on some of these issues because we hear the side or are exposed to the side that we engage with. And so I think, when we're making decisions about health, especially, as a physician, anytime I'm with a patient, it's a risk benefit conversation. And so you have to look at both sides of the argument for the decisions that you're making. And I feel like when we start to get a lot of our information that is pushed at us, it's pushed at us by what we're interested in. And so we lose that perception of seeing both sides of the coin.
Yes. Well, as we were thinking about this too, we said, there were kind of 5 things that struck us about ways people could actually action on simplifying and filtering through some of this news. So the first thing was, as the news is coming at us, whatever the media source is, whether it's traditional news or it's social media or it's a podcast or it's somebody in the hair salon, whenever the story is coming to us, is giving people a framework for how to do secondary and as I mentioned earlier, tertiary checks on the credibility of the resource relative to the content maybe they are discussing, right?
Absolutely. And I think, especially when we're talking about the wellness space, that's really vast. And a lot of people have what I'm going to call a non-traditional pedigree that come into this space who are providing really great information and who are very knowledgeable. And they may not have certain letters in front or behind their name. And there might be certain people with letters in front and behind their name that are in spaces where maybe they're not as credible. And so I think it gets really, really confusing. And so I think the bottom line is when you are listening to people, again, going back to peek into what the other side is saying, listen to the counter argument or the opposing viewpoint, because that can help you as taking care of yourself understand the full picture a little bit better. So I think that that's one thing that we can do, even to help even control what is pushed towards us, is saying, well, what's the other side of this? If somebody says this supplement is good, is anybody saying this supplement is bad? And trying to kind of work through that, or this exercise or this medication, whatever, this dietary plan, whatever it is that you're interested in, I think looking at both sides. And then I do think that if people are quoting scientific papers, like it is a skill set that has to be developed to be able to read scientific studies. And there are people in this space, and I'm just going to, drop names. I think Peter Attia is an excellent scientific reader,
Hmm.
um, and often explains both sides of the coin.
Right.
I think there are other people that skim an article or look at the headline and don't get in deep enough to really go through what that means. And
Yeah.
probably the last bit is confusing correlation with causation. And I think we have to be really careful there because it's very easy to take that out of context and for people to think that X causes Z when that's not what the science is saying. It's saying they're correlated, but we can't tell which one is that
Yeah.
X is actually causing Z. And that's a very different discussion.
Yeah.
And so I think that those are my take home points with kind of know
Filtering the
who,
noise.
how to filter the noise and
Yeah.
know who you're listening to.
Yeah. I think another resource that I've found helpful, and whether it's on women's health issues or kind of any issue that is polarizing, and gosh, there's a long list of them, is a site called All Sides.
Yeah.
And when you go to All Sides, it will actually represent the editorial point of view of extremes on the continuum, and then be able to present to you a synthesis of the middle ground. And so, whichever one you're drawn to, you can decide to go deep because it resonates with you,
Yeah.
or you can decide to just go, hey, looking at the middle, what does that look like? So, All Sides is a resource for that.
Oh, that's a great point.
Um, the second thing that kind of struck us in this kind of top five paradigm were the topics that were getting a lot of noise right now because, there's a news cycle. And so the good news is women's health and menopause and perimenopause, all that conversation really got a microphone in the last 12 months, and hopefully it continues, which is
Mhm.
awesome.
Mhm.
There were some other ones that hit our screens kind of right as the new year was coming online, and we're going to go do deeper dive issues. But one of the ones that seemed almost to be like inspiring us to both just like chuck everything in our house was all this conversation about processed foods and never evaporating plastic and toxins. And it was like we were talking about it going, okay, I feel like I just need to lay down, but I can't because my carpet's toxic. It's like all of it's overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
zip myself up in a bag, but I can't because that's plastic. So it's like there's a couple of these topics that there's a lot of really good energy around right now,
Mhm.
and we're going to try to help filter those with a practical lens in some upcoming episodes.
Yeah.
But the overall takeaway is that just because a topic is getting in the news cycle and everybody's picking it up doesn't necessarily mean it's changed in the order of importance and how you need to think about filtering
Right.
it in your lifestyle.
Right. And I think, my tipping point was, the microplastics in my tea bag as I was like, cutting down the wine I was drinking and thinking about dry or damp January and
Yeah.
pursuing that goal. I was drinking tea and now all of a sudden my tea's bad for me. And I
It's like nothing. It's
throw
like
my
came
hands
through
in the
the
air.
and then,
So
then you can't
I
drink bottled water.
agree with that. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like, we're all doing the best we can. Give yourself some grace. And I think, this is another place where kind of science and discovery is outpacing what this means. Like, and back to the correlation and causation. Okay, there's microplastics in my tea. What is that really doing to me as a human? Like, we don't know
Yeah.
yet, And so kind of just take it with a grain of salt. And that, again, science changes and evolves. And we're here to try to help
Yeah.
be a guide in that space and not overreact and panic every time something shifts a little bit.
Yeah. I think we talked about, especially when we think about environmental toxins, we had Dana on from Free Living Co. And I think people like Dana are doing this amazing job of filtering it for practical application and
Right.
like realistic budgets. So we'll have all these secondary sources in our show notes. But if you're starting to get panicked or alarmed about the toxins that are in food coloring and fragrances and plastics, there is rational reasons to be mindful of it.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are also people who've gone really deep and tried to filter this on our behalf, where
Mm-hmm.
you can just go, okay, headline says, pay attention to it, and I'm going to go check out this purveyor in hopes of trying to get to a simple answer that's also affordable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of leads us to our third one, and we had been trading together sources that we go to kind of gut checks. We talked about All Sides. We just talked about, for example, someone like Dana Grinnell and doing her platform Free Living, but also EWG for toxic products and kind of double checking what's worth being worried about and what's lower on the list. But you also had some great ones that you think are great to kind of gut check the science and some of the health
Absolutely.
reports as well as
So
supplements.
yeah, I think, supplements, as we've talked about, that industry is pretty unregulated. And so it's really sometimes challenging to know if what the bottle says is what's in it, et cetera. And so I think there are some companies that are really trying to be standout players in these fields. And so when you look at and you see certified safe for sport, or there's a couple different symbols that that indicate that those products have been third party verified, which
Okay.
means the supplement is sent to an independent reviewer to say the bottle says this, what's actually in it, and they verify that that's correct. And so
Yes.
um, there's a lot of different supplements, not just one brand sticks to that, but just those are things to look at when you're at the store, kind of looking at 25 different vitamin Ds. Which one do I want to take? If you
Yeah.
can look for those either safe for sport or third party verified, that means they've
Okay.
gone through that testing at the cost to the company. So it's an
Okay.
expensive profit. And so
Yeah.
companies that really want to promote having a quality product are willing to pay for that
Yeah.
certification that comes along with earning that badge. And then I think, as we've talked about in this space, medicine is conservative.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. You're going to get the most conservative advice, but going to kind of national accreditation boards, again, if you really have a question about cardiovascular health, going to the American Heart Association is a great place to start. It's
Yeah.
going to be conservative, but it's a great place to start. And every different bodily system has their association, like their national association.
Yes.
You can go to the Menopause Society. That's, again, a pretty great place to start. Again, it's going to be pretty conservative. And so
Yeah.
people that are pushing the boundaries in this space might challenge some of the information there, but it's good. It's fact checked. It's peer reviewed.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a crazy place. And so if you're just starting to get curious about that, that's a great place to start. And those are great resources that if you have a question that you want to talk with your healthcare provider on, that's a great place to get some basic information to
Yeah.
start that conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. And so I think the fourth thing that was helping us filter through this is this idea that we can focus more on what do we want to add in, and instead of being terrified and trying to shed everything that's a risk. And
Mhm.
so there, it's the same kind of pillars of health where we're looking for things. If you're going to prioritize, add something in that instead of being the example you and I were talking about is instead of being totally paranoid about canola oils, maybe just try to have an extra shot of olive oil in the day, because olive oil is expensive, and if you're putting that into all of your baking needs, that may not be accessible for everyone in their economics.
Mhm.
And canola oil is not the healthiest thing for you, but if you can't afford to replace it holistically with you know certified organic olive oil, that doesn't mean to be the end of the story. There are ways to add in things that are good.
Yep. And I would say that in every lever that we talk about, figuring out a safe way to move in your day, figuring out, how to promote sleep and optimize sleep and rest and recovery. And so everybody's environments are different. But I think, again, adding in, like, what can I do
Yeah.
instead of what shouldn't I do,
Yeah.
is just, and you're the expert here, changes our mindset and changes how we approach some of these activities. And, we have friends that compete in this space. We, have a
Yeah.
friend that is really trying to show that you can live this long, healthy life without restricting, and
Yeah.
his main counterpoint is probably one of the most restrictive, you know,
Yeah.
people on the planet. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I think you and I embrace that idea of what can we add in to
Yes.
uplift, to keep moving forward, instead of what do we always have to take out. And because usually when we're taking stuff out, it's the stuff we don't like. It's back to that old adage, like even changing habits is, it's easy to do the bad things, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to eat the candy bar. It's not as easy to eat the broccoli, right? Because
Yeah.
it's that immediate reward versus long-term reward. And so what can you add in without having to remove all the short-term feel good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Well, but you touched on this too, which is kind of our fifth filter, is to just think about the action items as you're reading these articles and you're like, oh my gosh, alarm bells going off everywhere. We have these five pillars for a reason, right? So we have these five filters for the media, but then we also have these five pillars for where we're focusing: move, sleep, nourish, community, and a little bit of the beyond, spirituality, something bigger than ourselves. And that is tempered with what are the four things that are most likely to knock us out, right? And you have made it so high on our priority list, thankfully, to be cognizant of health around your heart. Heart health is the number one component. So if you do that intersection around what are you reading right now, you know, maybe let some of the things go if they're not, flagging heart health and movement and sleep and nourishment. Doesn't have to be alarm bells on every single thing just because there are a lot of headlines about every single thing.
Absolutely. And just to kind of wrap this up, because we're keeping this one short, I think, we are entering a window where maybe you've tried some things for a few weeks and they're not really
Mhm.
serving you. Let them go. Get ready to try what's next. It's not failing, it's pivoting.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and then I think with that, we are going to start to hear things that are very different than the information we have been hearing. And again, there's benefit in that. There's
Yeah.
benefit in hearing the other side. Just be cognizant of what you want to grasp onto, because that science didn't change overnight. And
No.
so,
Yeah.
it's not like December 31st, there was one science and, a month later, there's different science. It's all evolving and it's all kind of perspective. And so just, again, take it all with a grain of salt, do your research. This is also a great place where AI can be helpful because it's going to search both sides. If you
Yeah.
say, what
Compare
are
and
the risks and
contrast. Oh yeah.
benefits of magnesium?
Yes.
And you throw that into whatever AI engine, it's going to come back with both. So that's a really quick way to at least get the high points, pros
Yeah.
and cons of decisions that you're thinking about if you hear something that sounds really different than what you've heard before.
Yes. Yes. Well, okay. I know we're going to deep dive in a bunch of this, but this was just sort of level setting to take out some of the, I don't know, sometimes it just feels overwhelming and you want to just literally tap out and do none of it, which is what we want to encourage people not to do. Just pick and choose it and enjoy kind of adding something in along the way.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for spending even just a few minutes with us. We're so appreciative, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks for listening with us today. Really quick, we're just going to go through our 5 categories again. 1, let's filter the noise. And so let's look at both sides of the problems. There's lots of different search engines and different places to go to do that. And we'll list some of those resources for you. 2 is not panic. Things will get a lot of noise. That doesn't mean they've changed in your priority list or that you need to completely throw out what you're doing and adopt a new system. Just see how those relate to what your personal goals are and what you enjoy doing, and then add them in or remove things as you feel it's appropriate. Number 3 is we're going to give you some resources, and these will be in the show notes to be able to fact check a little bit about what you're hearing. 4 is let's try to embrace this mindset that we can add things in and we're not just eliminating things out of fear and live in this restrictive life. That if there's things that aren't serving you, feel free to get rid of them, but we don't need to do that from a place of fear or panic. And the last thing is remember our priorities. And we go back to our big 5: move, sleep, nourish yourself, connect with your friends, family, loved ones, neighbors, and remember that we belong to something beyond ourselves and our communities, something beyond even what we can imagine. So thanks for joining us. Please remember to subscribe if you want to keep hearing our content. And please feel free to give us a review. That really helps us and helps us know what direction to head. Take care.